In the parable, one detail that isn't, readily apparent is the different units of money that are mentioned. One is a talent, one is a denarii. The wicked servant is forgiven several talents, which are orders of magnitude greater than a denarii. Right? These are the two. So it'd be something like you owed $1 million and it was forgiven you, right? And just to be clear, what was going on, when he's begging the master to give him more time to, come up with the money to not be sold and him and his family into slavery. And the master, right, the one who he owes debt to, doesn't just do that. He goes beyond the begging request that the man makes. He actually just forgives him all of the debt, which is worth noticing as well. And so let's say he gets forgiven like $1 million just gets wiped off, right? I don't know. Maybe you have a lot of student loans, right? They get wiped out, okay? And then you turn around and your friend who owes you $10 because you spotted him money last week, you start yelling at him and then you punch him in the face to give you your money back. Right? I mean, this is sort of the extremeness of it's like you were forgiven $1 million, you turn around and for like $10 you throw your friend in jail for it or something. This is how extreme this parable is that's being put forth. And it seems ridiculous, right? Who acts like that? Maybe some people act like that. But the point that's trying to be made is that God has already forgiven you for all the things that you have done or have failed to do. I think it's very easy, to forget our own sins. We don't see ourselves very well, right? This is why we need relationships. The other person, our friend, those that we're intimate with, they act as a mirror, right? It's very difficult to actually see yourself as you are. You really need to be able to see yourself through the eyes and through the lives of other people to actually figure out who it is that you are and what you should do differently or how you should live your life. We really do need other people in a very, very basic, fundamental way in order to even have any sense of identity, right? Of who you are. I mean, we've all, probably in high school, remember in psychology class, learned some of these extreme cases where, some child was raised without, being touched or without, human contact, and they're just, animals. They don't even have, a personality and things like this. We've heard these extreme stories. And it just does demonstrate that, if you don't have human interaction with another person, you can't become yourself. So you most literally cannot be yourself without another person, right? It's not even cognitively possible. You can't even live without some sort of touch from another person. A great example of this is, babies in mass orphanages, right? And what happens to the ones that don't get touched? Do you know? Or picked up? They just die. Everything's fine with the baby, but if they're not picked up and touched, they just die. And so the same thing is true for us. And so the degree to which we need that other person is profound. And so one of the things this story reminds us of is how difficult it is to see our own sins and how much we often do act like this very wicked servant where we forget. Well, when we forget all of our own mistakes very easily, they just slip out of our sight, even beyond our periphery. And we so clearly see all the wounds and harms and injustices that other people do to us. What we're reminded of in this is that God has forgiven us everything already. And even before we're forgiven, even before we've made any mistakes, everything that we have is already complete gift, right? You exist. You get to have, boilerplate existence, right? Which is pretty amazing, right? You get to breathe, you get to be alive, you get to see a sunset, you get to have the experience of hugging somebody. I mean, the most basic everyday things that we have are quite spectacular. And we get that. You get to be, right? So did you call yourself into existence? Or is actually everything you have already completely undeserved in every imaginable way? This recognition that when we say God is my creator, that's what we're acknowledging, right? When you say God is our creator, he's the maker of heaven and earth, what comes with that is this parable. That everything that you and I have is already a mercy and a gift. And then on top of that, no matter how much we screw that up, that's also forgiven. So it's just mercy on top of mercy. And so then and this is why it's important, if we can see that clearly, right, then how could we possibly judge our brother? I mean, that's what's at the heart of like judgmentalness. I mean, one, it's a kind of spiritual blindness, but it's a failure to even know who I am when I judge somebody else harshly and selfishly, right? It means I don't know myself. Because if I knew myself, I wouldn't do that, right? Because I would recognize that everything I have is complete mercy and gift and undeservedness. And that when I'm loved by somebody else, it's not because I deserve it. And when I'm seeking to love and forgive someone else, it's not because they deserve it either. That I've taken deservedness, right, of love and kindness and dignity, and I've taken that concept and I've put it in the trash can. Because we're not talking about deservedness anymore. Because who can claim that? And so what this teaching in this parable by Christ, well, one of the things that it gives us is it gives us a tremendous amount of freedom. Because the one question to ask is who is more imprisoned? The man who was forgiven and then threw another man in debtor's prison for a minuscule amount of money, or the man who was in prison, right? The inability for him to sort of have proper relationships with other people is profound. And so we're given this charge of forgiving other people. It is very central to the Christian life, this idea of forgiveness. And what forgiveness is, especially when somebody, maybe they've harmed us and the relationship is needed to be repaired and we've reconciled and then we're going to forgive that person. What that is a death and a resurrection, right? It's that this relationship died and now through forgiveness, it's going to be reborn. I mean, that's very much what forgiveness is. Like, let's start over again. I mean, if we don't have forgiveness, we have no path forward in our relationships with each other, right? Who can walk perfectly without stumbling? There has to be opportunities to take the ways in which our relationships are constantly falling apart and to be able to put them back together again in some way. And this parable reminds us of that. It reminds us of that power. This is also why we give generously and freely in the church of our time and of our money and whatever sort of skills or talents we might have. We give generously. This is also at the very heart of generosity. So realizing these spiritual truths, right, about myself and about God are at the heart of our Christian practices, right? I am generous because I have fully realized and accepted that I have been given far beyond what I deserve and need, that everything I have is undeserved gift. And out of that comes my generosity. Out of that comes freedom, right? Because what that means also is that there's nothing I could do or not do that would change God's love for me, right? Like, I don't have to earn it, right? Like, that's not what it's about, right? Like if I have a child of my own and I'm raising them and I love them, I want them to grow up. I want them to mature, right? I don't want them to stay a child forever, right? I want them to be, to reach their potential in some way, right? I mean, this is like the mark of a good parent is you really want your child to reach the potential that they're capable of. My love isn't conditional on that, right, as a parent. It's not like I'm only going to love the kid if they meet a certain threshold of my expectations, right? This is backwards. The love is at the foundation, right? It precedes all of those other expectations. I have the expectations for my child because I love them without condition, right? And so the child wants to please their parent, right? Wants to please his father, wants to rise up to his expectations, wants his dad to be proud of him, not so that he can earn his father's love. Now, I know sometimes that's the dynamic that we were raised in, or that's the sort of dynamic of relationships we've been in, that have sort of these strings attached, right? That are conditional. But we know that that's not the kind of relationships we need as a child. We know that's at least a little bit dysfunctional, right? And what you have instead is the child wants to make his dad proud because his dad loves him and he loves him back, right? That's it. And so the same thing brings us here in this place because we recognize that we've been given something that we could never repay and we're not expected to. We're given it so that we can flourish. That is why the gospel is good news, right? It's that beautiful truth of this undeserved love, right? That wipes out every debt. That is at the heart of our martyrs and all of our saints who have sacrificed their lives to the shedding of their blood is for that. And it's important to remember that the martyrs do not die for some principle or cause, right? They die for a lover. That's what martyrdom is, right? It's a story of lovers dying for the one that they love, that they will not betray their love to somebody else. And they're willing to die before they betray that person. That's what the martyrdom is. And it's rooted very much in this parable that we read, in this immense display of love. And then why is it that God doesn't want us to be like the wicked servant, right? Why? Because he loves us, because he wants us to learn how to love others and him the way that he loves us, right? The way that God already is love, already is communion and otherness from the very beginning because he's Trinity, right? He's not the solitary God, right? He's already the God who already is abandoning himself for the other. And he wants us to do that exact same thing. And that's what makes that good news. This is at the root of our generosity and our giving, right, to those in need and to the church. This is at the root of our non-judgmentalness, right? This is at the root of us allowing other people to be free and not trying to control other people, right? And it's good news. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.